Golden State acquiring Giannis Antetokounmpo. This time, it feels realer than ever. Now, there is a bit of competition around the league. Surely other teams are interested in making a Giannis trade.
That was the situation just days ago. The rumors, the speculation, the endless what-ifs that had been circulating for years. But now, it's done. Giannis Antetokounmpo is officially a Golden State Warrior, and Draymond Green's contract may be waived this season. What's happening to the Golden State Warriors? The Greek Freak goes west, inside the blockbuster deal that changed everything. The moment Golden State Warriors fans have been waiting for across what feels like an eternity of speculation, rumor-mongering, and endless hypothetical trade scenarios has finally arrived with the kind of seismic force that permanently reshapes the NBA landscape. Giannis Antetokounmpo, the two-time MVP, the defensive juggernaut, the physical specimen who has dominated basketball conversations for the better part of a decade, is now officially a member of the Golden State Warriors organization. This is not a drill. This is not another mock trade exercise, and this is most certainly not the work of overzealous fans on social media platforms crafting their dream scenarios in the middle of the night. The Milwaukee Bucks, the franchise that Giannis transformed from a perennial lottery team into legitimate championship contenders, have parted ways with their cornerstone superstar in what can only be described as one of the most consequential transactions in modern NBA history.
We got a lot to talk about in terms of the Giannis Antetokounmpo trade saga. I haven't been on the channel in a couple of days. I was on a little bit of a weekend trip, so there is a lot to discuss here.
The reporting that preceded this monumental transaction painted a picture of urgency, desperation, and calculated risk-taking that ultimately defined how this deal materialized. Multiple insiders describe Golden State as the team making the strongest, most aggressive push for Giannis, with owner Joe Lacob and GM Mike Dunleavy Jr. making it abundantly clear that no player except Stephen Curry would be considered off-limits in their pursuit of the Greek Freak. The Warriors front office operated with singular focus in the days leading up to the February 5th, 2026 trade deadline, treating every other potential move, every other roster consideration, and every other organizational priority as secondary to the primary objective of landing Giannis before the clock expired. Their offer was explicitly described as pick-heavy by ESPN's Shams Charania, leveraging their available future draft capital in a manner that few other franchises could reasonably match.
As you're watching Warriors Today by Chat Sports, and I am your host, Tyler Smith, Brett Siegel of Clutch Points saying the following. He says that to this point, the Bucks have not declined the Warriors' offer, according to sources.
What made the Warriors package particularly compelling to Milwaukee's decision-makers centered on the sheer volume of draft assets they could offer. Without running afoul of the Stepien rule, Golden State included unprotected first-round picks in 2026, 2028, and 2032, along with a 2030 first-round pick that carried top 20 protection. The additional pick swaps provided Milwaukee with the kind of long-term flexibility that rebuilding franchises desperately require when they find themselves starting over from scratch. The player components of the trade package reflected the Warriors' understanding that Giannis's approximately $54 million salary required significant outgoing contracts to make the mathematics work under NBA salary cap regulations. Jonathan Kuminga, the high-upside forward who represented Golden State's most promising homegrown talent in years, became the centerpiece of the player portion heading to Milwaukee. Brandon Podziemski and Moses Moody, both representing varying degrees of potential and immediate contribution capability, joined Kuminga in the package heading to Wisconsin. Bucks GM John Horst was reportedly fascinated by Golden State's future assets, recognizing that the combination of draft capital and young players provided exactly the kind of rebuilding foundation that Milwaukee needed after acknowledging their championship window, with Giannis, had effectively closed. The timing of this transaction proved equally critical to its completion. Giannis had been dealing with calf and ankle issues that sidelined him for 4 to 6 weeks, creating a situation where the Bucks faced the uncomfortable reality of watching their franchise player recover on the bench while their playoff hopes evaporated game by game. The frustration that had been building within the organization, both from Giannis's perspective regarding the team's direction and from the front office's perspective regarding competitive viability, reached a critical mass that made trade discussions not just possible, but inevitable.
He says even though the Bucks could potentially get more by trading Giannis this summer than by 3 p.m. on Thursday, Ramona Shelburne of ESPN says that Giannis doesn't want to sit out the rest of the year, and that could cause some tension up in Milwaukee. Now, the problem is that the Bucks can't risk Giannis tearing his Achilles. He's dealing with the calf stuff. He's on the shelf right now.
The competition for Giannis' services extended well beyond Golden State, with multiple franchises making serious overtures to Milwaukee in the days leading up to the deadline. The Miami Heat offered a balanced package that included Tyler Herro, Kel'el Ware, Terry Rozier's expiring contract, and first-round picks in 2030 and 2032. The Minnesota Timberwolves pursued a more player-centric approach, potentially involving Jaden McDaniels, Naz Reid, and Rob Dillingham. The New York Knicks, despite their limited draft capital following the McCall Bridges and Karl Anthony Towns acquisitions, remained in conversations as well. Yet the Warriors positioned themselves as the clear frontrunner throughout the process, their aggression and asset availability creating separation from competitors who either lacked the draft capital or faced salary cap constraints that complicated their proposals. The Warriors package was seen as one of the cleanest paths for a two-team deal, avoiding the multi-team machinations that other suitors required to construct competitive offers. The decision to proceed before the deadline, rather than waiting for potentially improved summer offers, reflected Milwaukee's assessment that the known quantity of Golden State's package outweighed the speculative upside of waiting. The risk of Giannis suffering additional injury, the organizational dysfunction that would accompany him returning to play for a team he no longer wanted to be part of, and the competitive advantages other teams might gain in the summer, all factored into the calculus that produced this historic trade. The organizational dynamics in Milwaukee had deteriorated to a point where the basketball operations department recognized that prolonging the inevitable served no constructive purpose. Giannis reportedly didn't want to sit out the rest of the year, creating tension with a front office that needed him to remain on the shelf for both injury recovery and tanking purposes. This fundamental misalignment of interests between player and organization accelerated the timeline for resolution in ways that benefited suitors like Golden State, who arrived at the negotiating table with packages ready for immediate execution. The Bucks found themselves navigating the uncomfortable reality that winning games actually worked against their long-term interests, a situation that became increasingly untenable with a competitive superstar growing restless on the sidelines. They get the worst of their first-rounder and the Pelicans' first-rounder, meaning every victory diminished their draft positioning and future asset base in ways that compounded the already significant losses they would absorb by trading their franchise cornerstone. The Draymond dilemma, how Green's departure became the key to everything. The trade that brought Giannis Antetokounmpo to the Bay Area required a sacrifice that many Warriors faithful never believed would actually materialize. Yet here we stand witnessing the end of an era that defined Golden State basketball for more than a decade. Draymond. Green, the emotional heartbeat of 4 championship teams, the defensive anchor who made the Warriors' death lineup possible, and the voice that held the locker room together through triumph and controversy alike, found himself at the center of the salary matching equation that made this blockbuster deal possible.
So who would that leave out? Yep, Draymond Green would be the one that ends up getting traded. It's the only way. Like, the Warriors just don't have the money on their books. They're not trading Steph. If they're not trading Jimmy, then the only other name that could go is Draymond Green.
The mathematics of NBA salary cap rules dictated that Green's inclusion became essentially unavoidable once the Warriors committed to retaining Jimmy Butler as part of their post-trade roster. Butler's $54 million salary matched closely with what Giannis earns, creating a scenario where the Warriors faced a binary choice between including Butler or Green in any realistic trade framework. The organization made the strategic determination that building around Curry, Giannis, and Butler represented the optimal path forward, even if that path required parting ways with the longest tenured member of their championship core. One rival executive who has dealt with the Warriors before in trade talks brought up the interesting scenario where Green himself could be on board with such a maneuver, suggesting that Draymond might accept a short-term separation with the understanding that he could return to Golden State as a free agent the following summer. Green's $27.6 million player option provided flexibility in how both parties might approach the aftermath of this transaction. The decision to waive Draymond following the trade, rather than allowing him to play out the season in Milwaukee, speaks to the complex relationship dynamics at play. Milwaukee had little interest in adding a veteran presence whose defensive intensity and locker room influence might interfere with their stated rebuilding objectives. Green's value to Milwaukee was seen as murky due to age, contract, and personality factors, making a buyout or waiver the most practical resolution for all parties involved. The emotional weight of this separation cannot be understated when examining what Draymond Green meant to the Warriors organization and its fan base. The championships, the impossible defensive plays, the trash talk that opponents hated and fans loved, the technical fouls that drove coaches to distraction, the podcast takes that generated headlines regardless of their accuracy. All of it formed the fabric of an era that basketball historians will study and celebrate for generations to come. Nick Friedel reported that the Warriors were steadfast in not including Butler as part of a package, a decision that effectively sealed Green's fate within the trade framework. The organizational calculus determined that Butler's offensive creation abilities and proven playoff performance provided more value than Green's defensive versatility, particularly when pairing those skills alongside Giannis's two-way dominance and Curry's gravitational pull on opposing defenses. The framework that emerged saw Draymond heading to Milwaukee alongside Kuminga, Podziemski, and Moody, with the massive haul of draft picks sweetening the deal. The control of 7 first-round picks for the Warriors over the next 6 or 7 years represented a significant price, but one the organization deemed worthwhile in pursuit of maximizing Stephen Curry's remaining prime years. Giannis Antetokounmpo and Gary Harris came back to Golden State as part of the salary matching components, adding depth pieces that might contribute minimally, but kept Giannis's brother close to facilitate the superstar's acclimation to his new environment. Giannis is coming in any Giannis trade. We know this at this point. He stinks, but he keeps Giannis happy. And the Warriors understood that keeping Giannis comfortable translated directly into keeping Giannis effective. The possibility of a third team involving itself to boost the package value surfaced throughout negotiations. Brett Siegel noted that teams out there are going to want to acquire Draymond Green for a first-round pick, suggesting potential scenarios where Green could be rerouted to a contender, seeking his playoff experience, while Milwaukee received additional draft compensation. However, the ultimate resolution saw Milwaukee handle Green's situation directly through the waiver process. The Warriors' willingness to sacrifice their entire young core, along with their defensive identity piece, demonstrated the franchise's commitment to win-now basketball at any cost. They've got to make this happen right now, and they've got to strike before other teams strike, recognizing that their draft capital advantage existed only until the summer when additional picks would become available to competing franchises.
Because the difference between the Warriors and a lot of teams that are making offers for Giannis at this point is that the Warriors do have that treasure trove of first-round draft capital. Other teams don't. And when the summer hits, a new year becomes unlocked in terms of tradable draft picks. So their offers will get better, but the Golden State Warriors offers will not. Like, they're still going to have the same number of picks they can send out. So they got to make this happen right now. And they got to strike before this other team strikes, the team that I think has the next best chance to acquire Giannis, if you consider the Warriors the favorites to make the deal.
The Miami Heat represented the most significant threat to Golden State's acquisition hopes throughout the negotiation process, offering a balanced package that combined immediate talent with future flexibility in ways that appealed to different factions within Milwaukee's front office. Ongoing discussions have also been had between the Bucks and Heat regarding Antetokounmpo, yet league sources say Milwaukee wants all of Miami's young assets, including Tyler Herro, whose scoring ability and contract value made him the centerpiece of any South Beach proposal. The Heat weren't offering all their young assets like the Warriors were, creating a disparity in perceived commitment that ultimately favored Golden State's position. While Pat Riley's organization contemplated which pieces they could afford to surrender, the Warriors made clear that everything besides Stephen Curry sat on the table for Milwaukee's consideration. This willingness to go all in versus Miami's more measured approach created separation that proved decisive when the Bucks finally pulled the trigger. The Timberwolves and Knicks both presented theoretical alternatives that never materialized into serious competition once the Warriors demonstrated their willingness to exceed what either franchise could realistically construct. The Knicks have like one tradable first-round pick, their previous acquisitions having depleted the draft capital necessary to compete in superstar sweepstakes. Minnesota's player-centric approach offered quality contributors, but lacked the future asset volume that Milwaukee prioritized for their rebuilding timeline. The super team scrutiny, what this means for the NBA and the road ahead. The formation of this Golden State super team immediately invites comparisons to the most controversial roster assembly in recent NBA memory, and the parallels to Kevin Durant's 2016 decision to join the Warriors cannot be ignored, regardless of how uncomfortable such comparisons might make the current participants feel. Giannis Antetokounmpo now faces the same questions, the same criticisms, and the same legacy concerns that followed Durant throughout his tenure in the Bay Area. League sources say that Golden State is aware of recent rumblings that Antetokounmpo can't be assumed to be as eager as he was once perceived to be to relocate to Steph Curry's town and team. The hesitation reportedly stemmed from concerns about joining an older team and facing the sort of criticism that Kevin Durant continues to absorb for his decision to team up with Curry after losing to the Warriors in the 2016 Western Conference Finals.
But according to Jake Fisher late Monday night, while Giannis does respect and has an affinity for Steph Curry, people around the league are wondering if he's actually wanting to team up with him. Here's the full quote from Jake Fisher's piece on Substack. Quote, league sources say that Golden State is aware of recent rumblings that Antetokounmpo can't be assumed to be as eager as he was once perceived to be to relocate to Stephen Curry's town and team. How credible are such rumblings? Presumably, only Giannis knows for sure. Yet I have heard from sources briefed on the situation that some in the know suspect Antetokounmpo could be turned off by the idea of joining an older team and or facing the sort of criticism that Kevin Durant continues to absorb to this day about teaming up with Curry, end quote.
Some in the know suspect that Antetokounmpo could be turned off by the idea of joining an older team and or facing the sort of criticism that Kevin Durant continues to absorb to this day about teaming up with Curry. These concerns apparently did not ultimately prevent the trade from occurring, but they provide important context for understanding the mental framework Giannis brings to his new situation. The contrast with Miami's organizational appeal proved particularly instructive throughout the trade process. For Giannis to join that group is trying to fit into what Steph has created there, that culture. Whereas if you join a team like Miami, that culture is not based on any one player. The Heat's organizational identity existed independent of any single superstar, while Golden State remained fundamentally Curry's team in a way that would require Giannis to subordinate himself to an existing hierarchy. Sam Amick reported that Giannis looks at Miami as a team that potentially makes a lot of sense for him, with the Eastern Conference preference and organizational structure providing theoretical advantages over the Warriors' offer. Yet practical considerations regarding asset packages and competitive windows ultimately overrode these preferences when the trade materialized. The competitive implications of this transaction extend far beyond the Warriors' championship aspirations, fundamentally altering the balance of power across the entire NBA landscape. The combination of Curry's shooting gravity, Giannis's physical dominance, and Butler's two-way versatility creates a trio that theoretically possesses no weaknesses, capable of generating offense through multiple avenues while defending at an elite level across all positions. The depth concerns that immediately surface when examining this roster reflect the typical trade-offs that super team construction necessitates. Golden State surrendered their entire young core, their defensive anchor, and their future draft flexibility to acquire one player, leaving the supporting cast composed of veteran minimum contracts, mid-level exceptions, and whatever reclamation projects the front office can identify in the buyout market. The Knicks have like one tradable first-round pick. They gave up everything for Mikal Bridges, illustrating how aggressive pursuit of stars depletes organizational depth and future flexibility. The Warriors now find themselves in a similar position, albeit with 3 superstars to show for their asset expenditure rather than a collection of quality starters. The championship expectations now rest squarely on the shoulders of 3 players who must remain healthy, engaged, and complementary for the Warriors to justify this extraordinary investment. Curry, at 38 years old, no longer possesses the same durability concerns he had in his early 30s, having proven his ability to perform at elite levels deep into his career. Giannis, despite the calf issues that precipitated this trade, remains in his physical prime at 31 and should provide the athletic dominance the Warriors lacked in their post-Durant era. Butler's presence creates both the most intriguing possibilities and the most significant concerns. Butler's ACL injury and the Warriors' preference to retain him despite that setback suggest confidence in his recovery timeline. But playoff basketball demands consistent availability that cannot be guaranteed with any player recovering from such significant damage. Pairing Giannis with Curry and potentially retaining Jimmy Butler could create an instant powerhouse, especially for a last-run title window before Curry's prime definitively ends. The championship or bust mentality that accompanies such transactions suits an organization organization that has tasted glory and refuses to accept anything less than another Larry O'Brien trophy. The league-wide reaction to this super team formation will undoubtedly include criticism, envy, and strategic counter-programming, as other franchises recognize that the Western Conference hierarchy has been fundamentally reshuffled. The Oklahoma City Thunder, Denver Nuggets, and Dallas Mavericks all now face a Warriors team that possesses the firepower to overwhelm even the most well-constructed rosters.
He doesn't want to re-aggravate his injury. The Bucks don't want him to re-aggravate his injury because that takes him off the trade block completely if he tears his Achilles. So it feels like they've kind of conceded and said enough is enough. We're going to make this deal, and it's going to have to get done by Thursday in the afternoon. Insane.
For Milwaukee, the rebuilding process begins with a collection of young talent and draft assets that provides genuine hope for the future, even as the present feels impossibly distant from championship contention. The Kuminga-Podziemski-Moody trio gives the Bucks a foundation of youth and potential, while the draft capital allows them to accumulate additional pieces through trades or direct selection over the coming years. The NBA landscape following this trade looks dramatically different than it did just days ago, with implications that will echo throughout the league for seasons to come. Giannis Antetokounmpo in a Warriors uniform, Draymond Green seeking his next opportunity, and the Milwaukee Bucks entering a new era of development and rebuilding all represent seismic shifts that fundamentally alter how we understand and evaluate professional basketball in this moment. The question of whether this super team construction validates or undermines the competitive spirit of professional basketball will be debated endlessly in the weeks and months ahead. Critics will point to the concentration of talent on a single roster as evidence of a broken competitive ecosystem where stars leverage their power to create unbeatable combinations. Supporters will counter that the pursuit of excellence naturally leads elite players to seek the best possible situations, and that Golden State earned the right to pursue this move through years of organizational competence and strategic asset management. There's a lot that some people are saying one way and some people are saying the other, reflecting the polarized nature of modern sports discourse, where every major transaction produces immediate and extreme reactions from all corners of the basketball universe. The truth, as it so often does, likely resides somewhere in the uncomfortable middle ground, where reasonable people can disagree about the implications and meaning of such a significant roster transformation. For Giannis personally, this trade represents both liberation and burden in equal measure. He escapes a Milwaukee situation that had grown stale and directionless, finding himself alongside two other superstars who share his competitive drive and championship aspirations. Yet he also inherits the weight of expectations that accompany any move to an established winner, the inevitable comparisons to previous super team formations, and the scrutiny that follows any player who changes addresses in pursuit of a title. The possibility of Draymond Green returning to Golden State in the summer months adds an intriguing coda to this already dramatic narrative. Would Draymond accept the minimum or the mid-level to come back to Golden State in free agency? Remains an open question, but the bonds forged through 4 championship runs and countless battles together suggest that this separation might prove temporary rather than permanent. The Warriors would welcome back their emotional leader at a reduced salary, while Draymond would get to participate in potentially the final chapter of the Curry dynasty. The championship implications of this move cannot be overstated when examining what the Warriors have assembled. A for accept, D for decline, as one analyst framed the choice for the Warriors organization, and they chose to accept the risks and rewards that come with swinging for championship glory. The price was steep, the future is uncertain, but the present suddenly looks remarkably bright for a franchise that refused to fade quietly into competitive irrelevance. Thanks for watching. Check out other cards on the screen.